Chapter 1. There was something wrong with the ship. It shook and pitched violently, making it difficult for its crew to remain standing. Warning lights, buzzers, beeps, and sirens intensified the sense of panic aboard the Obadiah. 16-year-old Zed of Zarnika felt helpless as he watched his father, Captain Zaref, struggle to maintain control of the Savarsian Exploration Society spaceship. Zed could see fear and uncertainty on the pale faces of the crewmen as they manned their stations or rushed to other parts of the bridge. Suddenly, a loud, repetitive clanging joined in with the other sounds, and Zed cringed, covering his ears as he looked around for the source. He soon realized that the noise was coming from somewhere in the interior workings of the ship, an area that would be difficult to access. "We're going to die," he thought, "and no one will ever know what became of us." "Zed," his father cried, "I want you to find the coordinates for a planet in this solar system. It's called Earth." Zed hurried over to an empty workstation and tapped into the Space Exploration Society data application, CESDA. A hologram of the solar system appeared before Zed, displaying several planets and their moons, but Earth was the only one that seemed capable of sustaining life. "I found it," Zed answered. "I'm sending you the coordinates. Are we going there?" "Yes," said Zaref. "It may be our only chance to survive." Zed gazed at the blue planet suddenly revolving in the holographic image. He hoped there was enough time to reach planet Earth, but with the ship behaving like it was, he had his doubts. He looked around at his fellow crewmates and wondered if these were their last moments of life. He wished he could help them, but he didn't have the training. Zed was just an apprentice crewman, and he was truly feeling that lack of experience. "Listen up," Captain Zaref shouted, and the other crewmen stopped what they were doing to pay attention. "What's the status of the ship?" The maintenance officer, Barzar, threw his hands up in frustration. "It doesn't make sense, but it looks like the forward engines are failing." "Show him, Sarnoa." The Obadiah's Science and Information Officer, Sarnoa, tossed her long blue braid over her shoulder and pulled up a holographic image of the spaceship's engines. She pointed out a region highlighted with flashing areas of yellow and red. "It's somewhere in this section of the ship," she explained. Captain Zaref shook his head. "That's a large area." He turned to the young crewman who was his tech officer. "Hargo, is CESDA any close to isolating the exact location of the problem?" Hargo looked up with his unique gold eyes, which were so different from the brilliant blue ones of his crewmates. "Not yet," he answered. "It shouldn't be happening," Barzar cried. "Hargo and I checked every part of this ship before we left Elysium." A flash of anger crossed Hargo's face. "There's only one explanation. The ship has been—" "Not now," Zaref snapped. He shot a glance toward Zed and continued in a calmer tone. "We're going to try to land on planet Earth." An image of a large landmass appeared on the screen before him. "We're going to aim for this area, a country called the United States of America. Try to do everything you can to stabilize this ship." "Yes, Captain," they said. The Obadiah's crewmen immediately resumed their duties, except for Zed, who had not been assigned any. He stood in the narrow aisle behind the workstations, watching his frantic crewmates. "What can I do, Dad?" Zed asked. "Nothing," his father said without giving him a glance. All his attention was focused on navigating the ship toward Earth. "Hargo," Sarnoa called. "CESDA is not responding to my commands." "I'll be right there," Hargo answered. He hurried toward Sarnoa's station, but the ship suddenly shifted, throwing him into Zed, and they both tumbled to the floor. Hargo scrambled to his feet, stepping over Zed. "You need to stay out of the way," he grumbled. Zed got up, rubbing his elbow. "Where is that?" he muttered. The ship shifted again, and a storage compartment flew open, spilling its contents onto his head. He immediately started gathering what appeared to be souvenirs and other personal belongings of the crew. He was on his hands and knees, reaching for a decorative jar, when Hargo returned. "Zed, you're still in the way," Hargo griped. "I was picking up this stuff that fell out of the storage compartment," Zed explained. Hargo brushed past him. "It's not important right now. The aisles need to be clear." "Zed," Captain Zaref called. "Go to the bubble pod and strap in." "But, Dad," Zed protested. "Don't argue with me." "I want to help," he pleaded. "Please, just tell me what to do." "There's nothing you can do," his father yelled, but then he spoke again in a softer tone. You need to go into the bubble pod where you'll be safe. Zeed closed the storage compartment, leaving the rest of the contents scattered on the floor. Okay, he murmured. Captain Zaref turned his attention to his young tech officer. Argo, maybe you should go with him. Argo shook his head. No, Captain, I want to stay at my post. But your family doesn't even know you're here. As tech expert, it's essential that I remain involved. But your father, Zaref began. My father would expect me to remain at my post. Argo looked down at his handheld Cessna device, breaking eye contact with his captain. I believe we can fix this problem, but we must hurry. All right, Zaref conceded. Zeed looked out the window at the front of the ship, mesmerized by the blue planet with swirling white clouds that was now visible. His father had said this planet may be their only chance to survive. He turned toward his crewmates. Barzar removed a panel from an interior wall, while Hargo gave instructions from his handheld Cessna device. The Cessna screen at Cernoa's station showed the interior schematics of the Obadichir as she continued to flash through them, searching for something. His father's view screen now displayed close-up images of the planet, mountains, trees, rivers, and roads. Dad's right, Zeed realized. There isn't anything I can do. He went over to his father and touched his arm. Dad? Zaref whipped around. Zeed! I told you to go into the bubble pod. Zeed hung his head. I know, but I... His father lunged forward, pulling him into a hug. This wasn't supposed to happen. I know, Zeed gasped, crushed in his father's tight embrace. Tell your mother and sister that I love them. You can tell them yourself. Zeed pulled away, looking intently at his son. We may not make it. You'll have to be strong. No. Remember what you learned at SCS training school. If none of us makes it... But Dad, you can't die. Zaref gave him a sad smile. I hope we'll be able to figure out what's wrong with this ship, but if we're unable to, you'll need to be prepared. I love you, Zeed. I love you too, Dad. His father pushed him away. Now go, he growled. And this time, do what I told you. Get in the bubble pod. Yes, Dad, Zeed replied, but his father had already turned back to his station and was focused on his task. Shame washed over Zeed as he headed for the large black orb at the rear of the ship. I shouldn't be here, he thought. I'm useless. If another fully trained crewman had been aboard, maybe they would have found the problem and repaired the ship. Suddenly, the ship rocked, turned sideways, and slammed Zeed onto the bubble pod's hard exterior. He heard other crew members cry out as they too fell against unyielding objects. When the ship returned to its proper orientation, Zeed scrambled to his feet and placed his hand on the bubble pod's smooth black surface. At his touch, a door appeared and whooshed open. He went inside, slapped his hand on an interior panel, and the door closed. Zeed stumbled over to one of the 4 chairs and proceeded to strap himself in. When he was done, he could barely move, but he was securely in place. His stomach was in knots as he strained to hear what was happening inside the ship. He wished he could be out there helping his crewmates. Instead, he was sitting here like a child who needed protection. He felt like he'd abandoned them, but he was following his father's orders. He sat there, alone and afraid, wondering how this simple mission had turned into such a terrifying ordeal. A Zavarsian bubble pod was a valuable piece of equipment included in all SES spaceships. It had a tough outer shell that could protect crewmen from danger when the bubble pod was removed from the ship and used on a planet. Even though its outer hull was extremely strong, it could be changed to mimic things found on a planet. A crewman could stretch or widen the bubble pod and change its color or texture to make it look like a small building, something from nature, or even a working vehicle. As a vehicle, the bubble pod could travel quickly on land, but it could not fly. It had to be unloaded from the rear of a spaceship and placed where it was needed. It was often used on missions independent of the ship and had its own Cessna computer, supplies, and tools that could be used in these situations. If a spaceship crashed, the bubble pod's outer hull could withstand the impact, and anyone inside would be able to survive. Zeed knew that was why his father sent him in here, but he hoped he wouldn't need to use the bubble pod in that way. Information flashed rapidly over the view screen at the main control center. The bubble pod Cessna was connected to the ship's system, accumulating information about what was going on with the Obadichir. The information moved much too quickly for Zeed to comprehend, but it would serve as an accurate record of what had transpired if the ship's SESTA computer was destroyed. Zeed knew he was in the safest place possible, but what about the rest of the crew? In his apprentice class, he had learned what happens when a spaceship crashes. The metals that comprised a Savarsian spaceship's exterior hull were strong. They had to be so that a ship could manage the conditions they encountered when traveling through space and entering and leaving various atmospheres of the planets they visited. However, a spaceship was not as strong as a bubble pod. Savarsian spaceships sometimes crashed, breaking apart while their bubble pods remained unscathed in the aftermath. Images of graphically detailed lessons flashed through his mind, and he worried about his crewmates. No, we're not going to crash. Everyone will survive. They must. Please don't let them die. He had no idea what was happening outside the bubble pod, but he could still feel the uncontrollable shaking and abrupt movements of the ship. Though the bubble pod muffled the sounds, he could hear buzzers, beeps, warning sirens, and the faint voices of crew members. Suddenly, the ship began to thrash around more violently. His whole body felt like it was about to be shaken apart, and a new wave of fear washed over him. How could the crew still be on their feet and going about their duties? But then the shaking stopped. Somehow, they had done it. The ship was now flying smoothly. Zeed heard shouts of joy, and he felt immediate relief. We're safe now. We're going to land on planet Earth, and everything will be all right. Zeed remained in his chair, wondering if he could go back into the ship. Maybe he should wait until they had landed on the planet. Minutes went by, and Zeed continued to wait. He could still hear the crewmates' voices, but they seemed calmer. I'm going to see what's going on, he decided. He released all the straps and headed for the door, but just when he was reaching for the access panel, there was a loud explosive sound, and the ship pitched downward, throwing Zeed into the curved interior wall of the bubble pod. A wave of panic surged through him when he realized the spaceship was falling out of control. He crawled to the nearest chair and struggled to pull himself into it. Outside the bubble pod, frantic voices called to one another. Zeed began re-strapping himself into his chair as fast as he could. He had not finished securing all the straps when he felt the horrible sensation of the Obadiah slamming into the ground. He heard loud, jarring sounds as the spaceship impacted the planet's surface, and the screeching of metal as the ship was ripped to pieces. Even though all the chair straps were not in use, the ones securing him held him firmly in place while he was shaken and jerked around. He cried out in terror as the thunderous sound of the crash filled his head. The bubble pod broke free and began rolling and bouncing over the terrain, turning Zeed end over end. The lights went out, and it was pitch black inside the bubble pod. Unseen objects flew around in the darkness, occasionally striking Zeed and adding to his fear. He gripped the arms of the chair while panic thoughts raced through his mind. Will this ever end? If the bubble pod would just stop, please stop. Before this thought could even leave his mind, a heavy object struck his head, and he lost consciousness.